Hello and welcome to the brand new HaytersTV Podcast. It's been a long time coming since we could say those words. With myself, Charlie Willard, and my live stream companion as such, Nick Callow. How are we doing?
Very well, thanks, Charlie. Great to see you in a studio, not in the stadium.
Yeah, I know, it's very, very cool. I mean, the aircon's in this, it's much cooler, but yeah, it's great to be here. We do apologise that we didn't have the live stream before, but we have got this video coming straight out for you today. And the first episode, and to kick off the first episode, someone very special, the Sky Sports reporter, Dharmesh Sheth.
Hello, Charlie.
Welcome, Dharmesh.
Yeah, welcome.
It's great to see you here. I mean, it's a real privilege and honour to have Dharmesh here because he really knows what he's talking about when it comes to football transfer news as well as football in general. And we're here with the football transfer window open. And in a way, what a better person to have into the studio. I've known Dharmesh for many, many years. I know he's a great guy, but I think the main reason, we don't want to hear about whether you're a great guy and how you work, but people are tuning in to see what's happening in the transfer window. Apparently there's some big news developing already today. Maybe you could tell us what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we're less than a week in. Thanks for having me, by the way. Really, really appreciate it. We're less than a week into this window, and I mean, there's all sorts going on at the moment. You know, we're talking about club record transfers. Who knows, maybe world record transfer fees. Who knows what could happen in the coming weeks. But with less than a week to go, the information I've got this morning is that Arsenal will go in with another bid for Declan Rice. We expect that bid to be £90 million. I know the information that, you know, we were getting that West Ham wouldn't be accepting less than 100 million, maybe 120 million if it included a player. But if you look at it from Arsenal's perspective, £90 million can't be balked at because this would represent an obliteration of their club transfer record. It still stands, believe it or not, from 2019 with Nicolas Pepe. He's still an Arsenal player.
Still on the books.
He's still there. And he cost £72 million. So this is £18 million more than what they paid for Pepe. Will it be accepted? It's unlikely it would be. But once that bid goes in, we'll have a clearer idea of what West Ham United will want to do, because all of the noises we're getting is that Declan Rice does want to make that move to Arsenal, and that can sometimes influence the price as well, because if nobody else comes in with the bid, it's very difficult for a selling club to create, you know, to use some transfer parlance, a bidding war between clubs. So if a player is set on going to a club and the club, through David Sullivan, straight after the Europa Conference League final, publicly stated that he's probably played his last game for the club, those ingredients can sometimes work in the favour of the buying club. So it'd be interesting to see how that one transpires.
So as you say, 90 million, it's a club record bid. It's a huge amount of money for a very, very good player. Probably worth it in the current market. There's talk about Manchester City being interested, Bayern Munich in Germany. I mean, I'd like to think one of the reasons we've got you here, because I know you very well, Dharmesh. I know that when you tell us a story like this, we know it's well sourced, it's accurate information. Perhaps you could tell people how a story like this would come about and where you would source your information and why our viewers know that Declan Rice £90 million bid is a bang-on true story.
Yeah, I mean, contrary to some opinions, I'm not just reading Twitter and sticking it out. So look, there are lots of people, lots of journalists, really good journalists, doing their own transfer coverage, and loads of people are going to have different contacts to be able to get different stories. So look, the best piece of advice I was given when I got the reporter's job back in 2001, so I joined Sky in 98 and I got a reporter's job in 2001, and my boss at the time, Andy Cairns, and I know you know him very well.
Legend.
Yeah, he walked past me one day when I was just on my computer minding my own business, and he walked past and then he came back again and he goes, "What's your contacts book like?" That's how we talk about him.
Good impression.
You don't know him, that is a really good impression of him. And I said, "Contacts book? What's that?" And he goes, "Right, every time you go on a shoot, every time you do an interview, I don't care who it is, I want you to try and get a number from that shoot or from that interview." And it's something that, you know, I've advised people to do because it's helped me so much in the past, because you never know when you're going to need these numbers again, right? So predominantly agents are the first port of call, but we have a protocol at Sky, and I think, you know, sometimes we get accused of being quite slow, but you know, we'd rather be right and first. First and right is obviously the main, you know, aim, but right is always the main aim. So if I get a story from an agent, I can't just put that story out, because I then call both clubs, not for permission to run the story, but just to give them the heads up, this is what we're planning to run. And I will give them like half an hour or 45 minutes to say, we're planning to run this at something o'clock.
And is that just to build the relationship as well between the two clubs and maybe future contacts as well, to make sure it's 100% right?
Exactly. The thing with contacts is, the question I always ask myself is, what story is worth losing a contact over or a relationship over? And I can't normally think of one, because you never know when you're going to need all of these contacts again. I mean, just to give you an example about how important it is and how people can help you with contacts and, you know, when you speak to agents, etc. I remember once I was on my way into the office. It was a Sunday morning, and I got a call from the news desk just to say, don't come into the office, go straight to this hotel in London. There's an interview set up with Jermaine Easter. Do you remember Jermaine Easter? I think he was a Welsh international. He played for Plymouth, so predominantly played a lot of his football in League One. And I thought to myself, right, I'm definitely going to get his number by the end of this shoot. So I turn up, and he's with an agent. I'm like, God, he's got an agent. It's like, right, I'm going to have to wait until the agent is out of earshot so I can get Jermaine Easter's number. So I finished the interview, and the agent looked like he was on the phone. I just said, oh, Jermaine, look, it's really good. Do you mind if I get your number? Just as I said that, the agent overheard and said, no, you just deal with me. I'm like, right, okay. So I took the agent's number down. That was best part of 20 years ago. Still speak to that agent like every other week, nearly every week. He has been involved in so many transfers that have helped me out, and he's so well sourced that he's normally my first point of contact. If I need a number of another agent, he will have someone who knows someone. That's why it's always important. I mean, you know the deal. You know
did he tell you about Declan Rice this morning?
No, that wasn't him. That wasn't him, actually. So, that's how it works at Sky, and that's how it works with me. I try and use as many of the contacts that I've got. But what you'll find is the longer you do it, the number of people you trust becomes, 5 to 10. So I have a list of all of my contacts, and the first 10 are the ones that I will always call on a regular basis, because they've got a lot of good players, but they've also got contacts with other people that I know they can get me in touch with.
And as well, you said off camera, I think it was a month, and then it would be 25 years at Sky, which is an incredible achievement of such. And that's not me calling you both old, by the way, as well.
I joined when I was 6, so.
But I'm interested, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers are as well. What is the biggest transfer story that you've covered, your most memorable, your favourite one, that has actually gone through as well? Because I'm sure there's a lot of stories where you see a lot of rumours coming through. You've had lots of phone calls, but the transfer's not gone through quite as such.
I mean, there's been a few. I mean, a couple that stand out for me. One is a really, really old one, actually, and it kind of just highlights the importance of making contacts with people. I was sent to a job in Carnaby Street because Fulham were launching their new kit, and one of the players launching the kit at the time was Louis Sahar. And the advantage I had, there were 3 players who were going to be doing interviews, and they were saying, right, you start there. And the head of comms was flitting between all 3 players. So just as I was finishing the Louis Sahar interview, she had gone off to speak to someone else, and that took my opportunity. Louis, do you mind if I just get your number? Yeah, no problem. So I quickly took his number down. And then within a few months, the January transfer window was opening, and there were huge rumours about Louis Sahar going to Manchester United from Fulham. And so I just tried my luck. I just messaged him. And amazingly, he replied, and we kept in touch throughout January until he made that move. And it was the point where he was giving me chapter and verse on what was going on. But within that, I just said, look, I know once you join, you're going to be under the control of United almost. And so they're going to control how many interviews you do, etc. Could I just get an agreement with you that you'll do something with me? And he says, yeah, look, you have my word. And so he joined, and then I messaged him, and then he was like, you're going to have to speak to the club. So I was like, this is not going to happen. So I said to him, look, I will get in touch with the club, but can you just tell them that I'm going to get in touch with them and that you're okay to do the interview? He goes, look, no problem. So I get in touch with United and I said, look, hopefully Louis spoken to you, but we'd had an agreement before he joined that he would do an interview. And they came back to me, go, yeah, Louis spoken to us. Let's just get the first game out of the way. It was his debut against Southampton, if I remember correctly. It was a Saturday lunchtime kickoff. And he actually scored on his debut. And they said it will be on the Tuesday or the Wednesday after that game. And they kept their word. So I went up to Manchester, went to the training ground. And I got then, you're still a little bit like, I just really hope this is going to happen. Because you was almost like, it's Louis Saha, it's United. So I get there, and at the reception, they're expecting me. That's all good. And then Saha comes out, he's finished training, whatever. He comes out, and I go, hey, Louis. And he goes, oh, gosh, yeah, it's the interview today, isn't it? I'm like, if he'd walked out the other way and gone home, it would have been...
It would have been game over.
So, thankfully, yeah.
I think, these are the things we often have to deal with in all our sort of world, work as journalists and sports journalists, people sort of arranging things, forgetting things, and it's until you've actually got that interview in the bag, recorded on the camera, broadcast live on Sky, then you can finally relax.
Yeah, and it goes back to something Charlie asked me before about, keeping contacts and keeping relationships good, particularly with clubs, because you're not just going to need all of these contacts during the transfer window. This is an evolving relationship that you have to maintain throughout the year, because it's not just going to be about a transfer story. It could be about a managerial change. It could be about a potential interview that you want to do. It could be about doing an interview with somebody, but trying to do something different in that interview. And they're probably going to be more receptive if you've built up a relationship with them. So as opposed to just doing, let's just do a sit down. Can we actually just do a walk and talk, or maybe go to training so it's a little bit more relaxed? And because you've built up a relationship, things like that, you might be able to get over the line, as opposed to if you haven't maintained that relationship before. So it's always, the deal. It's always about maintaining relationships with people, because you just never know when you're going to need them and when they're going to need you as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's always play the game, play the long-term game, never stitch people up, treat people well, and they'll treat you well too, which is how you come around to getting good stories like this Declan Rice, Arsenal's record bid of 90 million quid. We don't know whether that's going to come off or not, but could you tell us, Dharmesh, as well about some other transfer news involving Arsenal, Chelsea? I know you're well connected at both clubs. There's people like Kai Havertz, Thomas Partey, Moises Caicedo from Brighton. Is Balogun staying or going? Lawrence Williams, thanks for that question about Balogun, by the way.
Yes, I mean, with regard to Arsenal, and in particular incomings, generally, an overview, you can tell that they want to be really ambitious, and by the looks of it, they want to get their business done as quickly as possible. Yes, they're willing to wait to make sure they pay what they believe to be the right valuation as far as they're concerned. But if you go back to last summer, and I know Arsenal fans will be disappointed about the end of the season, but I know it's this whole in hindsight, but if you told Arsenal fans at the end of last season that you're going to be in a title race and you're going to end up finishing second, you're going to be qualifying for the Champions League with games to spare, they probably wouldn't have believed you. But part of the reason I think that they managed to do that is because a lot of their business was done so early. They pinpointed the players that they wanted and they got their deals done, so that by the time pre-season came along, Mikel Arteta was able to work with these players from the get-go.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And I think if they can do that again, because now they are in a market, and look, players like Jesus and Zinchenko, you know, they are A-list players, and you'd be going for them whether you're in the Champions League or not. I mean, they'd want to go to a club that's in the Champions League, but imagine the market that Arsenal can be dealing in this time. Not only have they been in a title race, not only have they brought in those players when they were in the Europa League last summer, this time they can go up to these players, look at all these players we've bought, look at the title race we were involved in, look at what we're building, but here we go, Champions League music at the Emirates, and you'll be in that team when that happens. So it's such a carrot for these players to come, and I think Arsenal will find themselves in a good position, particularly if they can get the deals done as quickly as they did last time.
And there's been a lot of talk about Declan Rice being the priority signing. Is that still the case, or is there? Because obviously, as we said, there's a lot of names. There's been a lot of names floating about. So.
It looks like the primary focus is on Declan Rice and Kai Havertz. Those are the two that they seem to be pushing more than most at the moment. But there's also another position that they want to strengthen in as well, and that's in central defence. They had that issue last season when William Saliba was injured for the last quarter of last season. It did affect them. It wasn't the only reason that they, didn't end up winning the league, but it would have been a contributory factor as to why they didn't. I think they want to strengthen in all areas of the pitch so that Arteta has got a squad that whatever the game and whatever team he picks, the drop-off from anyone missing a game is not going to be big. So somebody like a Jurrien Timber is a player that they're looking at. There's some reports that there's been a bid already that's been rejected, but I'm told that talks are positive and there's encouragement that Arsenal are receiving from the Havertz camp, from the Rice camp and from the Timber camp that they do want to join the club. So that can only be a good thing for Arsenal because it can only help them when they're trying to negotiate a fee with a club. Of course, a selling club is going to be very stubborn and try and get the valuation that they feel, which is typical transfer jargon anyway. But for a player to want to come to the club, that can only be good for someone like Mikel Arteta. You've been to so many of his news conferences, and he always says, I've never been interested in a player that didn't want to come to Arsenal. He's always put that out there. And I think he's finding that the players that they're going for, because of the project that he's building there, they do want to come to the club.
So these Timber and Rice stories, particularly, Timber and Havertz, particularly interesting, because they sort of come out of the blue a bit for a lot of Arsenal fans. Yeah. Declan Rice was a target, it seems, well into last season. Casado was, bid loads of money in January, but Havertz and Timber, I've never even heard of Timber till this morning. Well, I nearly fell over.
Yeah, Havertz in particular, I mean, for a lot of Arsenal fans I've seen on Twitter and across social media, was the biggest shock. Yeah. Because, again, Arsenal have built up quite a good relationship with Chelsea over the years, and the same with Manchester City now. But Kai Havertz coming out of the blue, I mean, they signed him for £75.5 million, which is a lot of money.
Chelsea will want to recoup the majority of that money. Arsenal will not want to be paying £75 million, particularly because they're getting noises that the player wants to join. And they can almost play on the fact that priority number one for Mauricio Pochettino appears to be streamlining that squad. We all know he likes to work with a squad of around 24, 25 players. You're looking at a squad at Chelsea that's 35 players plus.
It's too many.
You're looking at maybe 10 to 15 players leaving. So will that have an impact, you wonder, on their negotiating when it comes to trying to negotiate a price and how much they would want for a player and how much a club would be willing to pay? Because a buying club that goes to Chelsea will be looking at their situation thinking, well, maybe we can get a few million off here simply because of the situation that they find themselves in.
Can you tell us a bit more about the situation at Chelsea? Because it looked like, as you say, Pochettino is trying to cut the squad, but they also need to get some money back, don't they? Because they've spent so much money. And it looks like the Saudi clubs are coming in. It seems quite complicated. How do you cut through that? And what can you tell us about that situation?
Do you know what? When you look at Chelsea's transfer window, particularly the number of players that they've got, and we all know that they need to streamline that squad, but it just seems now the Saudi element of this summer's transfer window in particular, and we know it's been building in the last couple of windows, this could be manna from heaven for Chelsea, because it's always very difficult for clubs to be able to sell players, release players, particularly if they're on big contracts and they'll be like, well, I don't need to go anywhere because I'm on X £100,000 a week. Whereas Saudi have come in and they want to make their mark. And so, we're talking about not players who are 33, 34
young
plus.
players, yeah.
We're talking about players who are, still roundabout at their peak, who are getting very attracted by the Saudi project. And if you look at it, Edouard Mendy is one. Chelsea goalkeeper. That looks like it is very, very close to a Saudi club. You're looking at
N'Golo
Kante, but he would be a free agent.
Aubameyang, is that one?
Aubameyang is another one. There's lots of talks with Saudi clubs, but he's got interest from other clubs as well, like Barcelona, who didn't really want to let him go in the first place to Chelsea. There are a couple of others as well. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Kalidou Koulibaly. Now we know that Inter Milan were interested in Koulibaly and Lukaku, but they wanted to do loan deals. Chelsea got no plans to allow these players to go on loan. The later it goes, they might be forced into doing something like that, but so early in the window, no, we want to do permanent deals for these players. So the Saudi one is a potential one for Kalidou Koulibaly. Romelu Lukaku, the noises we're getting there is he still feels he's got plenty to offer European football. Inter Milan do want him. They want to do a loan. No plans for Chelsea to do that at the moment. So let's see if they can come to some sort of agreement whereby there can be some sort of transfer fee, because they're going to have to take a big hit whatever they sell or loan Lukaku out for, given that they spent 90 odd million on him in the first place.
So do we think Pochettino will get a big say in this? Because it seems before the new sort of ownership structure at Chelsea that players were coming in a bit sort of left, right and centre without Graham Potter perhaps knowing or having a great say in who was coming in. Presumably he's going to want to sign some players as well as seeing all these.
With the Pochettino situation, he has been approached by Chelsea before and he didn't go for whatever reason before. Now, was one of the reasons he didn't go before, you'd have to ask, because of the transfer situation? And has that slightly changed when he went back in with Chelsea for talks? Was he getting reassurances that he would have a say in what comes in and what doesn't come in and what goes out as well? But we know that he wants to streamline the squad, but we also know that he wants to bring in some of his own players as well. So potentially, are we looking at maybe a goalkeeper? Are we looking at a midfielder? We're definitely looking at a striker. And Nkunku's coming in. We know that's been announced today. That was another story, £52 million. That's been in the pipeline for much of last year, but that is now official. So he'll be a Chelsea player. They'll want to recruit in the striking department as well, because it doesn't look like Lukaku's got a future there. Aubameyang doesn't look like he's got a future there. Kai Havertz, who is playing in the number 9, probably not his position. It looks like he might be going to Arsenal. So big gap there for Chelsea to fill.
And the striker position for Chelsea has been something that's been a real problem for many, many years. I think that the best striker I could think of before that was probably Diego Costa, the year they won the league as well. And the amount of strikers they've had in that position, one being Samuel Eto'o when he came in the side. You had Lukaku, they spent a lot of money on, and now obviously Aubameyang as well. But is that going to be a priority position, do you think, 100%, out of anything?
100%. It has to be, because they had issues scoring goals full stop. They had someone like Aubameyang in the squad who they didn't use, who is a number 9. Whatever was happening on training, we don't know. We're not privy to that. But
he wasn't even in the Champions League squad, was he?
Wasn't getting picked by more than one manager. Graham Potter wasn't picking him, and Frank Lampard wasn't picking him either. So every expectation that he's going to leave because he won't be part of the plans. He's not the kind of profile Pochettino's looking for anyways. Someone in his 30s to lead the line. I don't think that's how Pochettino would want to start his reign at Chelsea. So definitely going to be a priority position for him.
And as well, Mason Mount, one man that's been the biggest talk in terms of outgoings, I think, in Chelsea, a player that's sort of come through the ranks. Is it quite sad as well to see him go, because again it's almost like a little homegrown player, and it's not nice when you see players like that leave, because he didn't really get much of a look in, did he, under Graham Potter? Well, linked with Manchester United.
Well, more than linked. I think he's only got a year left on his contract. There have been talks over a new contract, and nothing has come of those talks with regard to him staying at the club. Chelsea, we think, want around £70 million for him, but United, we know, are definitely interested. They've been in with one bid, and you can tell by the size of their bid the kind of money that United are looking to spend on Mason Mount. They started at 40, dismissed out of hand, rejected immediately. Those were the two phrases I was given when that bid went in. But every expectation that Manchester United will go in with a higher bid. They'll just probably do it not going straight up towards that £70 million mark. They want to find some sort of compromise between their first bid and what Chelsea would want, because they can play on the fact, like I said before, Chelsea need to release players. He's only got a year left on his contract. Chelsea need to be a little bit careful with this one, because if they continue to say no to every United bid that comes in, there will come a point where Manchester United, they are looking at other targets as well, as every big club would do. They've got to do due diligence, because they know how difficult number one transfers are, but in particular when you're dealing with another Premier League club and the amount of money that's at stake when you're dealing with a Premier League club. So if they were to pull out and he doesn't sign a new contract, then Mason Mount is then 6 months away from being able to sign a pre-contract agreement with a club outside England, and a further 6 months away from being able to go anywhere in the world for no money at all. And I don't think Chelsea want to take that risk. So it looks like something could happen in this transfer window with United, when we expect them to go back in with a higher bid, and then the negotiations will really kick in.
United is another very complex situation. One of our HaytersTV subscribers, Stephen Peter, wants to know all about what's going on at Man United. He says, can you ask Dharmesh about Man United, the takeover situation? Is the Mount deal still on? Well, it looks like it very much is. And Harry Kane. There's obviously the takeover talk at Man United.
This has been a talk going on for many years, hasn't it? Every season towards the end of it.
In an ideal scenario, Manchester United, particularly the manager, the recruitment team, would have wanted this takeover done well in advance of the summer transfer window. And what are we? We're already a week into this transfer window and no sign of this takeover happening. It's a massive deal, so it's going to take time. But the issue that United have got probably would be is, does Erik ten Hag actually know how much he's going to be able to spend against the backdrop of whether this takeover is going to happen or not? Now, I was at the FA Cup final, and after the final, he was in his news conference, Erik ten Hag, and he was specifically asked that question: do you have a plan A and do you have a plan B on your transfer policy, whether this takeover happens or it doesn't happen? And publicly, he's saying all the right things. He says, I've got a plan. That's it. I've got a plan. I'm sticking to that plan. But you'd have to think that there is going to be, that plan is going to be impacted because of this takeover. Now, at the start, two months ago, we were talking about Harry Kane being a real live target for Manchester United. That looks increasingly unlikely now, simply because of the stance Tottenham are taking. Tottenham, priority number one, they don't want to sell Harry Kane, least of all to a Premier League club. So you've got to look at this from Tottenham's perspective and Harry Kane's perspective. So you've got a situation with Tottenham. Their number one priority would be Harry Kane signs a new contract and he becomes a lifer for the rest of his career at Tottenham Hotspur. That's priority number one. Talks are ongoing, we think, over a new contract, but still no resolution with that. Now, the other two options potentially that they've got is, if they are going to sell him in this window, they'd want £100 million for him, but they'd want him to go to a club outside England. There was all this noise about Real Madrid, and it seems it would fit. Karim Benzema has just left the club. Harry Kane looks like the kind of profile of player that would walk straight into that team. The other option that could happen is Harry Kane doesn't sign a new contract at Tottenham, but he stays at the club, and then you're in a situation where he can go for free next summer. Tottenham might look at that and think, we could take a calculated risk here. Let's keep him and let him get used to what Ange Postecoglou's doing, and if he sees enough ambition from the club and enough from Ange Postecoglou to think, hold on, I could still fulfill some ambitions that I've got at Tottenham, then they could use that season to try and convince him to stay. It is a high-risk strategy, of course, because there's always that risk at the end of the season that he goes for no money at all. From Harry Kane's perspective, and this is something you'll have to ask him, how important is the Premier League goal-scoring record? It seems to be very important to him. He's on 213. He's 47 goals behind Alan Shearer. Could he leave Tottenham and go to Real Madrid for 3 seasons potentially and still come back to the Premier League and break that record? You wouldn't bet against that. But is that something he'd be willing to do? He's got a young family. They're settled in London.
This is exactly what I was going to ask, because I think a lot of people necessarily don't understand, and I'm sure, and being an expert like yourself, you can explain to the viewers, but there are a lot of factors that come into a transfer, and it isn't just a football decision. I think a lot of that, let's go back to Jack Grealish, signing for Manchester City. He was sort of and ahhing maybe 3-4 years at Aston Villa, because he was the man there, and he was a Villa boy, and he had a family there. It doesn't really, I know it's not exactly the furthest sort of distance you've got to travel between Birmingham and Manchester, but it's still a factor that comes into it. And Harry Kane has got kids as well. He's got a wife. I'm not quite sure how old they are, but again, if he was to go abroad, that's a massive decision for him to make.
Yeah.
So these
even
factors
to go outside London would be a massive decision. You know, there's lots of people asking the question. I'm just going back to Declan Rice. If Manchester City were to come in and make a bid, people are saying, well, it's a no-brainer. He would go to Manchester City and not to Arsenal. But it's not, as you mentioned, it's not as easy as that.
It's not just a football decision.
He's got a young child as well. He's in London. How important is that for him to remain where he is? Because for all we know, he's completely settled in London, and that's one of the factors, as well as the ambition that Arsenal are showing, as well as how he rates Mikel Arteta, as well as when he looks at the squad at Arsenal and thinks, they got that close last season. If I go, they added a couple of other players, could win the title here still. Who's to say that's not going through his head?
I think Arsenal fans may be watching the England 7-0 match last night when Saka scored. Rice was right in there celebrating.
I noticed that as well.
I see something on Instagram as well. I don't know if you noticed it. So Rice had put up a photo of him and Saka, a nice little selfie, saying that Saka was on fire, and Saka had replied in the comments, make of it what you will, but 2 love hearts. Do you know what 2 colours they were? Red and white.
Oh, there you go. Charlie,
make of it what you will.
Well, I'm sure Arsenal fans will be reading
Agent
what they want.
Saka.
Yeah. But going back to that again, players as well come into the factor of making that decision as well. Again, if Rice was to come to Arsenal, lots of England players now in the Arsenal camp: Ben White, Aaron Ramsdale, Bukayo Saka, Emil Smith-Rowe, Eddie Nketiah. The list goes on. So again, these factors are huge in sort of almost persuading or giving them advice on what Arteta's like, the way he coaches. These are factors as well.
Of course, and if you look, this is not just something that Arsenal have been looking at this summer. It's not something, let's go for Declan Rice. They've been pursuing him. You know, they went in for him in January, but they knew then that it was impossible for them to sign Declan Rice in January, simply because West Ham at the time were in a relegation battle. They still had chances in the Europa Conference League, and both of those ended really positively. And for David Sullivan to come out after the final, the day after, to say that he's probably played his last game for the club, all of those ingredients would suggest that, you know, he's going to leave. That's not to say West Ham will not dig their heels in and get the valuation that they believe Declan Rice is worth, but I'm sure Arsenal will be looking at all of those factors, and particularly the encouragement they might be getting that Declan Rice wants to go to the club. All of these can be factors when you're negotiating a price. You know, we're talking about maybe they want 100 million or 120 million. There's various ways you can get to that amount. Now, I've noticed if you're dealing with clubs abroad, sometimes French clubs in particular, like I'll bring the Nicolas Pepe deal into focus here. It was a £72 million transfer, but they were happy to have that £72 million spread over the duration of his contract, because French clubs normally need the money. And when they see a Premier League club, in fact, even German clubs, Italian clubs, Spanish clubs, when they see a Premier League club coming in for their player, they think we can raise the price here. Whereas if you're dealing Premier League club to Premier League club, they aren't under so much pressure to say, well, we'll take it in installments. They are like, well, no, of that 90 million that Arsenal are going to offer, We want the majority of that up front, and we want the rest of it to be in achievable add-ons. The conditions of the add-ons are as important sometimes as the initial fee. So West Ham United, say they want 100 to 120 million pounds worth of transfer fee for Declan Rice. They would want all of that to be achievable. So at some point, the 100 million pounds will be paid by Arsenal if it's going to go that high. And on the flip side, as much as Arsenal will want to keep the price down, if, say they agree on 110 million pounds for argument's sake, including add-ons, if Arsenal end up paying 110 million pounds, I think in a way they'll be happy, because all of those conditions will have been met.
Like,
that would include
example,
appearances, could be
Premier League.
trophies, could be anything. So if 110 million pounds exchanges hands, there's very, very strong chance that Arsenal will have been successful on the pitch with Declan Rice.
And as well, sorry, Nick, you talk about the add-ons as well. You talk about the fee, and Premier League clubs just wanted the money up front, but that is as well because they want to reinvest it as quick as they
100%.
can. Because let's say Arsenal take a player from Chelsea, well, Chelsea, that is a competitor as such. So they need to get that money straight away and reinvest.
And on the flip side as well, as much as West Ham will be digging their heels in about getting a price for Declan Rice, they then will find they'll be in the same position that Arsenal are when they go into the market. Because if, for example, we expect them, we think to go in for João Palhinha from Fulham, is one of their primary targets in midfield as a potential replacement for Declan Rice. If you are Fulham and they've just sold Declan Rice to Arsenal for 100 odd million pounds, what are you going to say to West Ham? Oh, you're offering this much? No. We know you've got a bit of cash now, so how about you start giving that cash to us? And then when Fulham go into the market, if they were to sell João Palhinha, they'll find the same thing. So it just carries on like that.
It sounds like this could be I don't know what the record is, you probably do. This could be like a record transfer window.
It's got that feeling. It has that feeling.
Could Arsenal sign Rice and Caicedo?
However unlikely that looks, you can't ever rule it out. Simply because the information I'm given is that the primary focus appears to be on Rice and on Havertz, and now the Urian Timber story is starting to get legs as well. But I'm told that they're keeping an eye on Moises Caicedo's situation at Brighton as well. And this is not an accident. We go back to January, we're talking about the interest in Rice. They really went for Caicedo in January.
£75 million, I think, was near enough.
I think the bid was worth about 70, the second bid, which was rejected because we knew Brighton weren't there to sell. From Brighton's perspective, they had a little calculated gamble there as well, because £70 million would have represented a £65 million profit.
Incredible.
More than that. They only bought it for £4 million.
Brighton's projects is incredible, aren't they?
Absolutely incredible.
They
but
must be a bit fed up selling all these players, aren't they?
but I mean, they are in that position where their recruitment is sensational, and they always seem to find a way. But what they did, they decided, one, they wanted to keep him because he's a fantastic player. They were in the FA Cup. They were trying to get a high position in the Premier League to get European football for the first time at Brighton. But also they knew that if he stays and he continues the form that he's shown, which he did, it's not just going to be Arsenal that are going to be interested in Moises Caicedo come the summer, because at the time they were the only ones who were bidding. Chelsea were interested, but they weren't putting any bids on the table. So they couldn't, put Arsenal up against anyone to create that bidding war again. So come the summer, they thought there'll be more than Arsenal interested in Moises Caicedo, and it's proved that way, because we're hearing that he's the number one target for 3 different Premier League clubs.
Who's putting this information out? Brighton?
No, so you'll speak to representatives of Caicedo, people close to Caicedo, and they'll be saying there are various different clubs who are interested in the player. And as I said before, going back to the start, I can't just stick that out. No. I will go to these clubs and say, look, I'm told that the Arsenal retain an interest in Caicedo. And if I'm getting the impression that it's not a denial, then I know that there's an element of truth to that story. Whether they can get both, completely different matter. But I think Arsenal are going to be in the market not just to bring players in, but there's also talk of midfielders potentially leaving as well. The Granit Xhaka one is still expected to happen. Bayer Leverkusen, very optimistic that they can get that deal over the line. But I think Arsenal want an element of certainty that a midfielder or two are coming into the club. Not necessarily signed and sealed, but an element of certainty that they will be coming in, for example, Rice, before they sanction that move for Xhaka.
It's funny, isn't it? Because me and Nick covered the last day of the season when Arsenal played Wolves, and I spoke to Mikel Arteta after the game, and of course he was in high spirits. Granit Xhaka scored 2 goals as well. There was lots of banners flying around saying farewell Granit. He got taken off as well, in I think 65th, 70th minute, which never really happens with Granit Xhaka. Got a round of applause, and it was just all seemed to be the perfect ending. To which my opening question to Mikel was, so this is Granit's last game, and if you've watched the clip, it went quite viral, by the way. Mikel turns around and says, you know that he's leaving then. Mikel, as we know, is someone that's very, very, until it happens. Like, it will not give you sort of any sort of exclusives where you want them. Could you see maybe, let's say if Rice doesn't come in, could you see Granit staying at the club then, or is this something that he is
the issue
definitely
that
leaving?
Arsenal have got here is he's into his 30s now, and he's got a year left on his contract. What they would be offering him compared to what we believe the German club are offering is a different length of contract, and at his age he probably wants more certainty and more longevity in the contract that he's going to receive. And you can understand it from both sides, because Arsenal want to start bringing in younger players, and you can't put someone who's 30 years old on a 3-4 year contract. It doesn't usually happen at Arsenal. There are exceptions, of course, but going back to what you said when you were trying to get that exclusive out of Arteta, if you look at it from a club perspective though, it's not in Mikel Arteta's interest to say that it is his last game, because, it's a bit far-fetched, but, West Ham can then suddenly say, oh, well, you're even more desperate then to get Declan Rice because you've said that Granit Xhaka's leaving. No, we haven't. He's not leaving. He's not leaving. Publicly, he's not leaving. Privately, there's all sorts of negotiations going on behind the scenes, but you can't give that public persona that someone's leaving to give that advantage to a selling club, because the selling club will pick on anything to try and raise the price of their player.
And the clubs are well connected too. There must be stories. I mean, we're talking about paying respect to our contacts and playing the long game and treating people well. And this picture above me this is Reg Hayter. If you want to know why Hayters is called Hayters, it was founded by Reg Hayter in 1955, and one of his great life lessons really is to treat people well, treat them as you would treat yourself. Yeah. And I just wonder whether there was stories that go around. I just want here's a transfer story that never came out. Okay.
Oh, here we go.
This is an Arsene Wenger Arsenal story. I don't know if this is him admiring a top striker in training. Now he wanted to sign it. Is that being envisioned? Now, I don't know if you remember this striker. This is about good 20 years ago.
Honestly,
yeah, it is me. See,
let me tell you something. Right, when I first joined Hayters, this was one of the first stories that I heard. So you're all living the same sort of dream as I am.
Didn't make the wall, no.
No, it didn't make the wall. No, but it's the one that got away. I mean, we couldn't agree terms. I was a bit slow and old. And
100 million.
He didn't offer me enough cash really, and. We just, we agreed to sort of go our separate ways, and I'll just play 5-a-side for the fat dads. That's where my probably natural place is. But there must be stories where they got away or didn't come off, or, can you, any good sort of yarns about that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, you see Arsene Wenger there. The number of times that we've heard him in news conferences saying Cristiano Ronaldo. That was one that got away. Zlatan Ibrahimovic was another, but Messi, one of the biggest ones was the Yaya Toure one, when he had a trial in the game against Barnet, and if you look at the footage, he didn't play that well in the trial, and they ended up not going for him, and then look what happened.
That was a mistake, yeah. Well, apparently he didn't pull his weight in the training, and he sort of said, well, look, take me or leave me. I'm Yaya Toure, even though he wasn't a sort of fully formed world-class player at the time.
I mean, you talk about, when you're keeping contact,
information you haven't used it, and then it's happened.
This is when you've got to be careful as well, though, because you get to that point where, like I said before, which people and contacts you can trust. I always have a red flag when I hear a contact say to me, I've got 10 clubs interested in this player. And the first thing that comes into my head is, well, who's the 11th club that you're trying to push to get this deal done? Because it's in his interest or her interest to have 10 clubs interested in their player to make the club that they're really trying to sell to, we better get a wriggle on then. Because
so they're using you effectively.
They can sometimes, yeah. But you've got to play the game a little bit there as well. And if there is genuine interest, then we would report that genuine interest as well. How much influence that has on a buff, we don't know. Clubs, I'm sure, are very, very, they're very astute in their dealings. They will do things their way. But there are occasions when transfers are played out more and more now on social media and in the media that certain clubs are thinking, who's briefing who here? Who's briefing this? Because this is not an accurate representation of what we actually want to do. And so it can influence fans as well, because you see it on social media. Oh, Arsenal, just get the deal done. Yeah. What are you waiting for? Just pay the 120 million. Hold on, we've got a valuation here. 120 million might not be our valuation. So we are comfortable where we are. We know how much we can afford, and we've got other targets that we need to have money for, because we can't just keep spending, because we have our budget for this summer. So it can't just be, if clubs listen to everything that happened on social media, they'd be spending $1 billion every single transfer window, which is
what I want to ask now is, because these are the sort of questions I know you guys have been sticking in the comments down below, so I'll speak for you, is who do you think in the Premier League is going to be the biggest spender? So we go top 3. Of course, I mean, Chelsea have been sort of way in front of everyone the last 2 windows. But yeah, who would you rank maybe? Who's going to be the third most amount of money spent, would you say?
I don't think it's going to be, it's not in this window, Chelsea. I think they've done something unique in the last 2 transfer windows, which you'd expect a club to do over a number of transfer windows, but they wanted to get a load of business done in 2 transfer windows, spending close to £600 million, and then worry about, right, we need to start selling these players.
It's a lot of money.
In a bit of a position though, because if you've got a European club, not so much the Saudi clubs, if a European club or a Premier League club want to buy their players, they feel that they can negotiate a bit more. I mean, we've spoken about them already. I think Arsenal will be up there.
The most?
It's difficult to say the most. They'll be up there spending the most. And I think they want to be ambitious, and I think they want to back Mikel Arteta, but simply because of the players that they're going for.
And the position they're in now as well.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're looking at Havertz and Rice on their own, you're looking at the thick end of 150 million. There.
That's a lot of money.
That's just those 2 players. You bring Urian Timber into the equation, that could be another 40 million if they can compromise on a fee. So you're already touching 200 million. There aren't going to be many teams who are going to be spending more than 200 million pounds in this window.
The richest clubs now are Newcastle United, Saudi money, and Manchester City.
And we haven't even spoken about them then.
Surely they can blow everyone out of the water, can't they?
They could, but the thing with City is what they do kind of reminds me a little bit of what Manchester United did at their pomp under Sir Alex Ferguson. It was never really a revolution every summer. It was more an evolution, like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 players leave, 1 or 2 or 3 players come in. It's never like 6 are gone and 8 come in. They've got to that stage where they're just tinkering with that squad. 1 position here, 1 position there. Newcastle United is the interesting one, because they're the ones who've got the new money now, but they seem to be doing it in an organic way, particularly under the stewardship of Eddie Howe. They haven't really gone out and said, we're going to be spending £100 million on a player. They have their valuations of players. They have the personal terms and the wages that they'd want to pay a player. And at the moment, they're not really moving outside of that. They seem to be negotiating even now on James Maddison. They don't want to overpay, whereas Leicester City will be thinking, even though they're in the Championship, and that might bring the valuation down, when they feel they're dealing with like a Newcastle United, they will feel that they can go higher with their transfer fee, whereas Newcastle United do not want to be used in that way. They've got their valuation. They don't want to be used in a way just because all of this money is there. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be spending it.
Do you think they'll get Maddison? Manner.
It appears it's going to be between Newcastle and Tottenham, and I think a big factor will be where Maddison wants to go, as well as a transfer fee, of course.
Two ends of the country as well. Again, that's a factor.
It is, but you've got a situation where Newcastle United can offer Champions League football, or you can be part of a new project under Ange Postecoglou, and we don't know those kind of talks that go on behind the scenes, how convincing these talks are for a player. We just look at it from the outside. Of course he's got to go to Newcastle because they've got Champions League football, but there's other factors they need to think about.
But these are the differences between the factors being the club being the pull and the manager being the pull, and I think we've seen that over the years with massive clubs. For example, Manchester United. You've got the club as a stature as Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs or the biggest clubs in the world in terms of fan base, and necessarily their position in the league and in Europe hasn't been ideal really in the last few years. But now you've got a manager like Erik ten Hag who's set a project, just like Mikel Arteta at Arsenal, who will speak to the player and address what their project is, what their situation is, and where they fit into their project. Yeah. That's a huge factor as well.
100%. I mean, Sir Alex Ferguson was the master of that, wasn't he, back in the day?
Absolutely.
He'd find out all he could about the player. He'd know his parents' names and all that kind of thing.
I've read about that, yeah.
All of this kind
personal
of
touches, yeah.
Exactly. And so can you imagine if you were a player and Sir Alex Ferguson speaking to you and he's trying to convince you to join the club and he's found out various things about you? I'm sure there'll be an element of that with the likes of Arteta and Ten Hag and Klopp and Pep Guardiola as well. If they're saying they desperately want you, it'd be hard to resist that.
100%.
I mean, are there any other subjects we want to talk about? Johnny, any other players? We haven't talked about Liverpool at all, or the newly promoted clubs, and I mean, there's probably we could talk all day, but we haven't got all day. You've got to get back to getting on the transfer news and grooves and tell people what's going on. But I think we've pretty much covered everything, haven't we, Charlie?
It's been a
really fascinating chat to have you in, Dharmesh. These are Thierry Henry's boots, by the way. He's the one.
If you have been wondering,
he's the one that Arsene signed instead of me. What could I do?
I think to wrap up as well, if this is okay with you, I want to do a real quick fire. I'm gonna say a name and a team, and in your personal opinion, just need if you think they're going to happen, so maybe a yes, no, or a maybe.
Okay.
Try not to say
maybe.
Try not to say maybe for every single one, but from what you've heard of already. So we'll start listing a few names. Let's start with the big one being Declan Rice. Is this a deal that yes, no, or a maybe in your opinion?
Arsenal.
Yes.
Yes.
There we go. That's the first one. Mason Mount, Manchester United.
What's just below a yes, but above a maybe?
Okay, so we like this game because you get more of an answer out of it.
Probably.
Harry Kane to Manchester United.
No.
Well, there we go. So we've not had a maybe yet, so this is okay. Kai Havertz to Arsenal from Chelsea.
Very possible. Very probable.
Moises Caicedo. Are we going to see a Ricedo at Arsenal?
Maybe, maybe not.
More
between the no and maybe.
Yeah. What else have we got here?
I think Caicedo's, the noises I'm hearing is more Chelsea with Caicedo.
Interesting. You can listen a few names if you want to, if you've got there.
I just wonder what's going to happen with players like Jordan Pickford. Is he going to be leaving Everton? I think he's been.
He's publicly saying all the things that he's happy at Everton, but you got to look at their financial situation. If a bid came in for him, would Everton be able to resist it or not?
James Maddison because I've heard more likely Newcastle early on, but I know Spurs have been up there. So
every single day I've heard.
One or the other.
He's leaning towards Newcastle, he's leaning towards Tottenham, he's leaning towards... This is a call I have to make later on today, which I'm trying to get information, so I don't want to commit
on that one. Do we think Ilkay Gundogan will start the season at Manchester City?
Yes, no, or maybe.
Not asking where he's going.
Is he going to leave? Because obviously his contract is coming.
Well, I mean, is he going to start the season at Man City?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, if he starts the season at Man City, he'll have signed a new contract.
Right.
Because he's out of contract. Mm-hmm. So it's a very difficult one, that, because City want to keep him And I think this is there's a lot of players. I'm trying to fudge this one now. There are a lot of players who have been linked with moves away from City. I just wonder if you get in the heads of those players, what's their thinking at the moment? Is it just done the treble?
What is it?
And I want to do it again and again and again with City. Or I've done the treble. It's not going to get better than this. So maybe a new challenge. This is the right time for a new challenge. You know, looking at the likes
next question. Carry on.
You look at the likes of, Kyle Walker. You're looking at who's leaning towards wanting to stay at City and sign a new deal. Bayern Munich are interested in him.
Bernardo Silva as well.
Bernardo Silva, every single summer for the last 2-3 summers, there's been links with him leaving. I just wonder whether this is the summer where he actually does leave. City will not stand in the way of players if they want to leave, but they will ensure that they get the right price for that player.
Okay, Pep Guardiola. Because he's done everything at City. He's a bit like the players too. There was rumblings before he might be leave, and he has his longest ever spell, hasn't he? At one club, has been at City. Do we think he will be in charge of Manchester City come August at the start of the next season?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Slight element.
No. I just want to give myself wriggle room, don't I? Yes. I think these questions, man. This cheeky. You didn't ask me about this. This has just got all the elements of
we can
just going wrong.
No, but in all fairness, Dharmesh,
I'll say, and then something didn't happen.
Yeah.
No.
But do people do that too? Do you get a lot of stick on Twitter and socials? I think that's a yes, not a maybe.
Of course.
And what do you do with it? How do you handle that? Do you read it or?
Well, I just mainly my replies are less of the bald, mate. Because I'll add an expletive after the bald.
Oh, do they?
They're the nice ones.
But you look great with that.
You
look younger. You get grey hair like me, you know.
And in all fairness, the reason why I asked Dharmesh is because listen, the game's the game, but at the same time, Dharmesh, there are. It's all the views are your own. This is the research that you do, the information that you can give, and as we said right at the start, these are information that are checked 1, 2, 3 times. So
some of them I'm just
opinions.
Opinion.
Yeah, of course. Opinions just like me and you.
And situations can change, like
exactly
you said,
like that. But I think that is all we have got time for. We've been here a long while, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed. So please make sure you do drop a like, subscribe, and also hit the notification bell. And if you're watching across all of our social media platforms as well, please do drop a follow. And one last question I'd like to ask. Drop in the comments who you want to see on the podcast next. We have some really exciting names on the list, which you'll find out very, very soon. But I want to say thank you to Dharmesh.
Just very quick, I just want to say thanks to Nick, because a lot of people don't know that way back, this was in the mid-90s, I was doing a summer job at the exam board in London. And I'd always wanted to be a sports reporter, and I was chatting to a few of the other people who were working there. There's a guy called Dave Coomansing, who I was chatting to.
What a name.
And I said to him, he said, what would you want to do? What are you doing? I started telling him what degree I was doing, etc. I said, I really want to be a sports reporter. And he goes, funnily enough, I did a bit of work experience with these guys at a place called Teamwork. And I said, right, okay. And he gave me the number of Jerry Cox and Nick Callow. So I was like, right, let me just...
Always keeping the numbers.
Yeah, so I got in contact, and they gave me my first work experience. This was this must have been 95 or something, because it was in Hammersmith.
Yeah.
When Haters and Teamwork were separate entities. Nick and Jerry were running Teamwork, and it was incredible experience because I think I did it over 2 summers, and sometimes I was in the studio and I was writing, stories for the program. And then on a couple of occasions, they sent me to games and said, you're doing the report for it. So I was just thrown straight in. So that's an opportunity to say thanks for that.
Thanks, Dharmesh. And you were always, you get a lot of people coming to work experience, and very few just stand out. It's a bit like when your manager's spotting, but something, I've got to sign him, or he will go a long way, or she will go a long way. And you were one of those people, and it is always a pleasure to turn up at a football match or a football press conference and see you in the room. You're going to be in safe hands and have a good time. And thanks for coming along, Dharmesh.
Yeah, honestly, thanks so much for your time. And yeah, like I said, if you have enjoyed the podcast, please do drop a like, and
no nasty comments for Dharmesh.
Don't like that. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on episode 2.